Welcome again to the ICS Security Radio Hour, half hour with me, Eric, and
Me,
him,
Dwayne.
Dwayne. Good to see you today. I'm excited. What do we think we should talk about today?
Well, I'm going to say a dirty word or dirty phrase at any rate. ITOT convergence.
No, not ITOT convergence. Everyone hates that term. Why do we hate that term?
I don't know why we hate that term. I guess because if you're in ICS, you feel concerned, negative, something bad about, you feel something bad about IT people coming in and making changes and breaking things and wreaking havoc upon your systems? Is that maybe why we think that?
That
I
would
don't
be
know.
one way. I just don't like it because everyone talks about it and it's boring.
It's it's well, here's I'm big on words, right? It's so imprecise,
Sure.
right? That's my biggest problem with it. It is just absolutely so imprecise, right? And as usual, I want to play the historian here for a moment, right? Somewhere along the line, which that's odd because you're the historian. Somewhere along the line, leadership. I'll say it that way. Somewhere along the line, leadership of your company, whoever that is, came in and said, "Wow, there's all this very interesting data that's available coming out of these machines on the shop floor, and I want access to all of them because, of course, then I'll make much better decisions." Now, that might be true or not. You might have heard a little inflection in my voice, but what it led to was, we're walking away from air gaps, which may or may not have ever been a reality, into connectivity. And usually because they wanted, usually, I'll say that again, specific application data to go, to drive MES or to drive decision making, or who knows and who cares, right? But what ended up happening was at the lower levels of the OSI model, um, we're connected. Everything can talk now, and maybe we did that for one specific thing. Maybe we put in a firewall. Maybe we didn't. I don't know. I'll stop there, and you can throw in your 10 cents.
Well, yeah, I think there's two ways that we've converged, right? I think both are by decisions, right? But sometimes maybe they're by strategic decisions or less strategic decisions, and some are exactly what you said. Hey, we're going to do a pilot, or we're going to try to do this plant. We're going to try to connect it up. We're trying to figure out what data we've got kind of sitting on the floor. Little did they know the temperature is always 100. Maybe when it's off, it's 0, and it's on, it's 100. And what are we going to learn from this? Well, it's 100 all the time. Okay, well, we got that one. We figured out that maybe not be a thing we're going to look at. But anyway, we've strategically looked at the process and we've said, hey, we want to figure out, we want to instrumentate, we want to take the instrumentation that we've already got. We want to put that onto some kind of a network, some kind of a thing to get that data up to something that we can then make a decision, collate, figure out, organize, etc. And we're going to get some insight out of it. There's the first strategic way that we've converged, right? And then there's the other one, which is we just plugged it in, and I think it's converged now. I think we can see the thing. I can ping it. It's pretty good.
Yeah,
It's online.
yeah,
There's the second version of conversion, and there's no judgment in the second one. I think that that's if you need to get something done, you gotta get it done, and then we all are. I think we're all guilty of trying to make something work, and then we try to figure out later.
yeah.
But there's your convergence. There's your two types of convergence, and maybe there's some little bits in between. But there's your two types of convergence. Fair?
I think, but as usual, I'm gonna throw a little more detail in there. A couple things I've certainly seen over the years is, look, we had all these plants, we had air gaps, to say all that over again. So you had all these separate networks, and we don't need to go into all the history, but there's a lot of overlapping IP addresses, not only in an individual shop floor, but certainly among enterprise networks when there's 10, 20, 200, 500 plants. And you can only go so far and do so much with firewalls and network address translation and this and that and the other, and so ends up with a lot of unnatural acts, and therefore a lot of work is done just kind of keeping the lights on, as they say. So there's that, right? And then I think, and again, I don't think we need to go into all that detail, either that's affecting you today or it isn't, but the other side of it then becomes, okay, well, who owns this mess now, right? Because for a long time you had smart guys and gals that were ICS folks, and they've had a simple network that may have grown up out of DeviceNet or whatever, but it was simple and it worked. And then it became bigger, and less understanding was gleaned, and the people that built it retired, and et cetera, et cetera. So then you get into an issue around, we'll go back to the topic in what's really converged. It's converged at maybe layer 1, 2, 3, 4, in a couple instances up to the application layer. But when we talk about layer 8 and 9, the old joke about what's layer 8 and 9? It's religion and politics. Well, I'll contend a little differently. It's ownership, management, and GRC, right? It's who's able to actually talk about what happens here. And quite often you go all the way up into the C-level, the C-suite of the company, before the responsibility, whatever converges, right? So a lot of times
philosophy is there, yeah.
You go up to COO or the CEO before those responsibilities converge, and that's not how it's run. So I guess again, that's my biggest problem with convergence. So let's make this real, though, right? So what practical advice can you and I give today as we see that happening and has happened to our audience over the years?
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and I think that I think you said something there that is probably pretty useful in the sense that the philosophy, as you say, sometimes sits at the high end of the organization. I think that I would empower and I would argue that every single one of us as practitioners in our world should take ownership of this stuff, and we should have a philosophy, right? More often than not, because we're the ones who know how to get the stuff done. We're the ones who should have a philosophical view of how these things should work and how these things should be organized. And when they get converged or are converged or have happened to be converged in the past, that there should be a rationale and a reason for that. And I think that echoes back to many things that we've said on previous shows and previous discussions. But I think this one has an action to it, in my opinion, which would be go out and implement the philosophy. Go out and do it instead of just saying we're going to get it done and keep things working and keep things running. Structure your work, structure your infrastructure, the way that you do things to meet that philosophy.
So we're going to get out the fire and the guitar and hold hands and sing Kumbaya? Or...
I mean, I love doing that, but...
So let's talk about a couple of very concrete things, right? And then again, talking usually from the OT perspective. Somebody shows up much like the old saw, the government. I'm from the government. I'm here to help. Hey, I'm from IT. I'm here to kind of take over this stuff.
Or I'm from corporate, or I'm some strategic
whatever
officer.
The words are, right? And it's again, it's a peer or somebody that just shows up, right? And there's understandably a lot of pushback, and I think if we have advice, it's first and foremost, understand where the programs are coming from, understand where the initiatives come from. Who owns this stuff? And that's a hard question to answer just to begin with. And everybody, and especially everybody in IT, right? I've spent time on both sides of that wall. The IT people will probably believe they should own it all, right? Because they know the network. They often don't want to take responsibility for lopping people's hands off when the network fails, but they probably don't also even realize that's an eventuality that may or may not happen. But at any rate, I digress. It comes down to if it's you, what is the advice? The advice is, how can I help you, the listener? How can I arm you to appropriately respond here? Because I think all too often there's a very emotional knee-jerk reaction that says, "You're not touching my stuff."
Right. Go away and come back. We'll have a meeting about this later.
Yeah, or just go away,
Right.
and no more to that sentence. And I think it ends up being, well, and I think hopefully everybody can be honest here. I think that part of this is we don't always understand how the system works as well as we should.
Hmm.
Um, and that means even on that physical level, on that network level, and maybe we don't even want to admit it. So what's the advice there, right? It's go do
Take
your
some,
work.
go do your work and take some ownership, right?
Yeah, take the ownership of the things you can understand and know about. I mean, I think, I had this discussion we were talking about earlier. I had this discussion with a guy at API, which just went to the conference the other day. And all too often, and certainly it's happened to me any number of times, it's you want to get something done and you need to learn a new piece of gear or protocol or whatever. And what you end up learning is sort of the bare minimums to get it done. And this gentleman and I's biggest example, and I think the one that everybody can always point to and understand is, well, you put a firewall in and all of a sudden nothing works and you're trying to read the documents and maybe you're running a sniffer and you're doing X, Y, and Z from a technical standpoint. And sooner or later you get annoyed at midnight and you allow all connectivity to run. And then it works, of course, because it's not a firewall anymore. Um, and you're going to come back and fix it later. And you have good intentions, but maybe those never get met, right? So just, I mean, to your point, I think good advice is learning better how the system works is always good. And then being able to educate others, let's just say others, InfoSec, IT, et cetera, about some requirements and needs and kind of why things are done. And I know
Sure.
we've said that before, but I think in this particular instance, it's probably the most important thing, right? Is if we go from this idea of convergence and whether we're fully converged or not, help me understand that. How does that look in your world?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna put a little different spin on that. I think when you look at a doctor, let's talk about doctors. You're going into a surgery and you're saying, hey, somebody needs to have their gallbladder extracted. I don't know. I'm not a doctor. When you go to that person, they're going to come in and say, well, I'm going to cut you open and I'm going to go look at your gallbladder or whatever, right? And that person has theoretically had years and years of experience, right? When they make that cut on you, they make it very precisely, and they've done it 100 other times, right? Because they know exactly what they're doing. They had multiple people. They've watched other people do it. They understand the philosophical reason for why they're making the cut. They understand all the anatomy around the cut. They understand what happens when a cut goes wrong or a cut goes right, or what looks good. And they know the 8 to 18 other steps that come in that are going to come after that cut is made, and how you're going to get how it's going to heal and how you're going to stitch it up, and then what's going to happen down the road after that cut's been made. And that's because those people have had massive amounts of training and massive amounts of understanding, and they've dedicated themselves to making that cut perfect every single time. And I think the lesson there for that is, I think every single one of the people who are now being asked to do these conversions and convergence of IT and OT, there's no one else in an organization that's going to be the doctor of IT/OT convergence, at least on the level that you understand it. You're making the cuts, you're doing the work and the thing. Challenge yourself to be the doctor of IT/OT convergence. And so when someone says, I'm going to do that, you say, good, I know how to do that. And I'm not afraid of opening up the cabinet or setting up the firewall or doing the switch work or understanding what's going to happen when I do an upgrade on the firmware. Being that doctor is a powerful, useful thing for both yourself, your organization, your understanding, and your own personal growth. And frankly, there's probably not a lot of other people who are going to want to be the doctor of that thing, right? And at least if you come in with that idea, you can say, I'm going to then, you can then, because you understand all the basics of this, and again, my analogy is getting far away here, but you can come in and say, well, now I have a philosophy about how I'm going to do this, right? At my plant, because I understand the network and I understand the process and I understand the technology, we're going to implement IT/OT conversion like this, right? And this is how we're going to do it. And if anyone questions you, you can say, well, I know how to do all this stuff, right? And so it's not a question of somebody showing up and say, I'm here to help. It's like, good, I'm glad you're here to help. What are you trying to get done? Because here's how things operate here. Or here's how things operate at all my group of plants. Or here's how my things operate in this organization. Or here's how things operate in this part of my team, right? And I think that's a powerful thing to come in and say, because you have an opinion, you have an understanding that no one else is going to have. And I think that ultimately makes it so it's not version 1 of convergence or version 2 of convergence. It's a version 3. It's a philosophically driven, understanding version of convergence that is organized and methodological and frankly professional.
Okay. I don't want to take your analogy too far, but I'm listening. I'm nodding my head for the most part. But then I also think, well, wait, how long do doctors go to school? And I'm in my, well, let's pretend I'm in my mid 40s. I don't want to go back to school for 8 years. So I get what you're saying. I agree in principle, but then I would also say, maybe you're not the doctor, or maybe you have a lot of knowledge about, or what I take out of what you said is, I want to understand my domain of expertise, which may or may not, and I know we talk a lot about networking, but it's pretty relevant here because that's where, the rubber meets the road. Almost said a different phrase. That's where the rubber meets the road, Eric. And so I need to understand maybe how my devices and my systems talk, but I'm not a network expert, nor do I aspire to be, nor do I, quite frankly, want to put that kind of time into my career. But I should understand the basics. And more importantly, I should be willing to work with some people and not just, throw my hands up and say, don't touch it is one extreme of that, which I think is bad. But the other equally bad part is to say, yeah, come do whatever you want, because I think we know where that leads to. But to say, hey, I can work with people in a consultative approach to getting this done. And if part of that is, hey, I don't understand this particular thing, or hey, Bob, who retired last year, was the expert here. I really need to dig into a few things there. And I think I'm saying some of the same things back to you, just at maybe a different level of effort. Maybe I'm a little bit of a slacker and you're not, Eric. But
I think you can take the philosophy that I stated and take it down to individual things, right?
yeah,
Hey, I don't understand, PLC 1. What does PLC 1 do versus PLC 2? Or why is that plugged in there? I guess it's a philosophical mindset shift into how you do things to
that's your
understand
word
why
of
you're
the
doing it.
day.
I
That's
know I like
that's
the
your
word
word of the
philosophical
day.
today. I don't know
Okay.
why.
Okay, but and I'm okay with it. Don't get me wrong there. Then let me say that back to you again, then, because it's okay. Well, I should make sure I'm got my domain under control again. I'm not sure that I always do, and I'm not sure that I ever want to admit that to other people. So, you know, that's just wrong, or that'll break it, or I'm not, or don't touch my stuff. I don't know what'll happen. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Throw a few more aphorisms at it there. But at the end of that, you say, I got to work with these people. I can't just give them the Heisman. And the way to work with them is to make sure the system still runs. Do you, as an ICS professional, want to learn all about networking so you can own it? Um,
Maybe not.
Probably not. And that may not even be what leadership is telling you. So you want to get in an argument and be miserable, or is there an alternative approach, I guess? So when it comes to convergence, I guess, to go back to what we talked about in the beginning and wrap this back up a little bit at least, is I think the biggest problem about convergence has a lot to do with many things that are outside of technology. And more importantly is we haven't converged any of the upper layers yet. We've converged a handful of the physical devices, but nobody in the organization is saying, well, we put this support organization, this incident response organization, this management, network management, and maybe even just regular management team together to do this right. And as I often do, as I say, well, part of this is to say, where are these resources coming from? Because to your point, if we're in chaos, it's because we don't have enough resources to do.
So you are now the resource.
I don't want to put a 14th hat on. My
That's right.
my neck already hurts from wearing 13 hats. So yeah, don't just do it. And I won't say do it wrong. Don't do it half-assed, because there's all too many things that we kind of all do half-assed because for that reason I just named. So we should certainly learn what we need to learn, but we should also be able to say this is a job that is important enough. This is and I want you to weigh in on the future. But this is a job that's important enough that we need to do it right instead of I'm not saying we're doing it wrong today.
Yeah.
We're probably doing it half-assed today.
We have now left the world. We're leaving the world of I'm going to make it work and I'm going to figure out how it works to I'm going to know how it works and I'm going to feel great confidence in the way I'm going to do to make it work again or way I'm going to make it work the first time. I have great confidence in understanding how to do that and be able to explain it back to others who may not understand that world in the same way that you will understand how that fits in when other people tell you this is the way they'd like something to work. And you'll understand how you might be able to help or fit in that world. Fair?
Okay. How does that, and I defy you not to use the word philosophy in the next answer. How, how does that look into the future? What are you setting yourself and the company you work for up?
I mean, my initial reaction would be you were setting yourself up to be the trusted advisor, to be the trusted expert on something. You're going to be the go-to person. But I
Okay.
don't know. What do you think, Dwayne?
Well, I guess we touch on this in almost every episode. I always like to is like how do you keep your job, right?
Sure.
Or how do you get another job? And I think a part of that is, and look, I resemble this remark. I have resembled it in maybe all too many of my jobs. Is you don't want to be that crusty old guy that's hard to get along with. You do, and look, I'm not going to psychoanalyze myself or anybody else, but it is certainly much more inviting to be able to say, look, this is, give you an example that we both worked on. Is like, look, we're in an old-fashioned environment. They've got PLC fives. The guys on the ground kind of understand, hey, this we're keeping this running by sparing off eBay, and that's getting more expensive every day, and we're using consultants and outside sources to change code, and they are either prohibitively expensive or getting to the point where they don't want to touch it. So what do you do when things break at that point, right? I mean, and it's you have to be able to go to somebody. You have to go to leadership again and be able to say, this is the situation. How are we budgeting for $5-10 million brand new system stuff? Are we getting better at least documenting and understanding how the system works? Is there a way to piecemeal some replacement stuff? Everybody loves that thought. Or you say philosophy, but I just say vision, future, plan, right? What if you're telling me, Mr. Whoever, that we got to band-aid this from now until forever? It's like, okay, but we all need to actually nod our head and agree that sooner or later we're going to have a fault or something's going to break in a disastrous way, and then we're going to not be up for a hell of a long time.
Right. And I think there's your there's your thing that being the professional in that situation uh, gives you great weight, right? In the sense that you can come in and say, "Good, that's a fine decision," no matter what the decision was, from the spectrum of just keep it running and do it to net new, we're going to rip it all out and do it again, or somewhere along that spectrum. Being the professional in that situation means you know what the answer is. You know what the mission will be when the decision comes down, or you help build that decision. You're going to be okay with the outcome of that, regardless.
Okay. I don't know. I like it. I like it. Okay. Um, Simplification. I think that's something that's been on my mind lately, and um, everything would be very specific. So all I can say is, if you go through these things, you and I talked not too long ago. Um, why would you walk into a place and open a cabinet, and we've all seen them? There's a rat's nest. Why would you why would you sit down and clean that up, or what was untangle that,
Untangle.
right? And I think there's both a very real and physical um, model of that. And again, rat's nest kind of wiring, but really almost no matter what, you can apply that thought process. So what's the value of that? What's the value of that simplification, of that cleaning up that documentation and something that's running fine?
The value, I think, in my vision of that would be confidence and and the ability to truly feel comfortable, confident and
Okay,
comfortable. You can open the
fair
thing
enough.
up and say, I know why that's done that way, or I know why
Yeah.
that's running that way, or I know why that light's blinking, or I know I can open the cabinet and it won't get shut down. All those things are valuable, and as we well know, very few people are going to want to do that.
It's and I guess I'm thinking again, trying to put myself in the audience place. When I ask questions like that, people think about dollar values, right?
Hmm.
And I don't know that you can easily put a dollar value on it, which is quite often what you end up having to do to justify it. But if you look at what are the risks? How do you troubleshoot it? Back to we did an episode on resilience, or maybe we're gonna do an episode on resilience. Sometimes hard to tell. Uh, and that's part of resilience, right? Well documented, neat, clean. I work on old cars. Mentioned that before. I always, almost always, when I restore an old car, put a brand new wiring system in it, because all too often you can't follow that, you can't troubleshoot it, you can't figure out what's wrong with it. And I'd say, not only is that true of wiring, which seems to be the discussion of the moment, but that's true of every portion of it, right?
Oh,
If
there's
layer,
wiring, and there's wiring in the network. There's
yeah,
wiring in the yeah in the engineering of things as well,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you
Um,
probably actually, by the way, don't want to redo the wiring because Lord knows pulling that cable's hard.
maybe not, but simplify, right? And I think again, as you walk up the stack of networking, is why are these protocols on the wire? Why is this machine out here? Is there anywhere? Is there anything I can do to simplify that? Move it, change it, run it as a virtual machine, and take it out entirely, right? I was in a CNC machine shop years ago, and they had, in a troubleshooting step, they had put all these stops into the program. So as an operator, you were letting the machine do its thing, and it would stop, and you would press a button, it would go on. And at one time in the dim history of the shop, uh, somebody had put that stop in to collect data. Well, they don't need the data anymore, but that step is still in there. That stop is still there. So working with these guys, we were able to take a lot of these stops out and save a bunch of money they were going to spend on they were going to expand the shop and bring in more machines. So sometimes it just takes that physical eye to what's going on to simplify and make it easier. And I think those things all kind of mix together here. But I'm digressing as always. So what are we doing? What's the advice?
Regardless of where you are in your convergence journey, be a work adult.
Easier said than done, Eric, but
I'm
good
a
advice.
terrible work adult most of the time.
Yeah, me too. Well, you've done it again. You've wasted a perfectly good half hour with me, Dwayne.
And me, Eric.
But please, as always, do the things that you're supposed to do, like subscribe, hit whatever buttons you can, and give us the feedback we'd love. Thanks.